second. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Good morning again. Today we're going to talk about completing and submitting the Periodic Performance Report, or PPR. So here are the usual slides. We are recording, as you just heard, so we're going to keep everyone muted. So use the chat box, please, to share your questions and comments, and we'll stop periodically to address them. After the session, hopefully this afternoon, we'll be sending you an email from the CJA.R3training@illinois.gov mailbox, and that email will include the recording, the PDF of this PowerPoint, and a summary of some of the key information and next steps that we discussed during the training. We're almost at the end of our training series, or at least our initial training series. So if you are still looking to add folks to our invitation list, you can use the CJA.R3training mailbox to send me their name, their role in the grant, and their email, and we'll send them the list. So we have a couple of important topics to cover today. We're going to talk about the purpose of the PPR, review some of the basics of the PPR. Lauren Weisner from our Research and Analysis Unit will actually demonstrate how you will complete the PPR and submit it. And then I'm going to finish up by kind of talking about how we review the PPR. What do we do with the PPR once you have submitted it? So let's start off with the purpose. So the PPR really serves both the authority as the funder and our grantees as well. So as it says here, the PPR collects data that reflects the performance of each of the grant programs that's based on the goals, objectives, and performance measures that are detailed in your grant agreement. And so as you're in the stage of executing your agreements now, that's why we spend a little extra time working on the goals, objectives, and performance measures to make sure that they're meaningful, so that the information that you're collecting throughout the life of the grant really does, for our purposes, it really helps inform our understanding of the grant program. We use it to identify any issues that need technical assistance, but it really reflects the performance of each grantee as they work through the implementation of their program. But it also can be a very valuable tool for our grantees to help them measure their performance and see where they need to refine their program implementation. My very favorite story about data reporting is very early in my career with the authority, when I was monitoring a group of drug prosecution programs across the state. And one of my my grantees, he filled in all of the data. He never filled in like the narrative information. And when I came out to do my site visit, I actually took some time and I graphed the numbers that he was collecting, he was reporting. And I was like, well, let's take a look at that data that you're filling in and see how it looks, on our end. And I showed him some of the graphs, and he was like, oh, wow, look at that. What happened here with this spike, or what happened when there was this dip. And I was like, so it's really an opportunity every quarter for you to take a step back and look at the data that you're collecting and kind of reflect on your performance. And that's why we always include narrative questions in our PPRs, so that you have that opportunity to reflect on those numbers, on that data, and to tell us about your successes, tell us about the speed bumps that you're encountering, and to discuss how you'd like to navigate, or you are navigating around those speed bumps. So it's a valuable tool for grantees as well as the grantor. So as I said, the narrative information is really important because it helps to give context to all of the numbers, right? So no matter how good a job we do in collecting, counting things and collecting that data, sometimes it's that narrative, when you tell me, quickly tell us a story about one of the successes or about one of the speed bumps that you encounter, it helps us understand better what those numbers mean. So we always ask you to reflect on the successes, the barriers to implementation, and those strategies to address those barriers. So it gives us a deeper understanding of the program and all that it takes for you to implement it. So, but we also do care about what you're counting, because we aggregate that information across all of the programs that we're funding, because we report to the authority board as well as the authority budget committee when we're making designations for future funding. R3 is unique in that it has its own board, and so we also meet with the R3 board periodically and report to them on our progress in the implementation and what we're achieving with our R3 funding. And we also report to the Illinois General Assembly as well. So I'm going to hand it over to Lauren Weisner, who is a research scientist in the authority's Research and Analysis Unit and is one of the core members of the RNA R3 research team. Lauren?
Thanks, Maureen. Good morning, everyone. So like Maureen said, my name is Lauren Weisner. I am a research scientist with the R3 research team. Specifically, we work under the Center for Violence Prevention and Intervention Research. I just wanted to put everyone's names on this slide to kind of demonstrate to you that we do have a pretty big team that is working specifically on R3 related research throughout the next, the life of your grant contract. You will likely get communications from any of us. So just wanted to put their names here so you can kind of familiarize yourself with that. So how does your PPR tie into research? So specifically, your PPR enables researchers to understand how your program is operating each quarter. So we can look at the data that is submitted, and we can also track that how that is changing over time, right? So we can see an increase in things like client served. Maybe there's a dip in client served, and like Maureen said, that could be explained in your narrative as part of your PPR. So really, it provides us a better picture and understanding of how your program is working throughout the quarter. It also measures progress towards goals. So if you have worked at all with getting your grants executed, you know that your program was asked to develop specific goals, objectives, and measures related to the R3 program. And the PPR is a way to submit data that demonstrates how you are making progress towards those things. And it also allows researchers to feed information back to you. So I will talk about that in just a little bit. So after you execute your grant agreement, you will receive a link to the PPR system for your grant. So the PPRs are submitted through an online reporting system, and each grantee will receive a unique link to submit their quarterly reports. That link will follow you throughout the life of the grant. It does not change, it will remain the same. And you can just click it, each quarter and submit that data. But the system itself will be sending you an email. The system is called Qualtrics. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But you will also receive a link to a folder which contains some associated materials related to the PPR. So things like a list of the PPR questions in a Word format, also in an Excel template, which would allow you to, download that and complete your PPR tracking in Excel before you submit it into the online system. It also will contain an FAQ document that I've kind of been drafting throughout the life of R3. So I've actually been working on R3 since it began. So I started my work with cohort 1 and developed the online reporting system. So I've gotten a lot of the same questions over the years. So I've just drafted an FAQ document that, lists out the most commonly asked questions and kind of those answers to that. There's also also something in there, what I'm calling a data dictionary. So basically detailing exactly what we mean by each data point, how we specifically define it, and hopefully answering and getting ahead of some of the questions that you may have about the PPR system. So once you receive your PPR link, I would recommend clicking through it, familiarizing yourself with it. Please let your grant specialist know if there's any glaring errors in it. One big thing, like I said, is the links are unique to each grant. So, if you get to the page where it asks you to verify your grant information and your grant information is wrong, that's a very big red flag, and you want to reach out to your grant specialist about that. So again, the PPR uses an online survey tool called Qualtrics. So everything is submitted through an online tool, and the PPRs themselves are customized for each grant. So because each of your goals, objectives, and measures in your grant agreement are unique, each of your reporting systems are unique. So every single grantee will receive a unique link for that specific grant. And as you kind of described, the PPR also includes narrative questions that allows you to kind of detail your successes, barriers, and your strategies to address barriers throughout the quarters. It also includes questions that will be used specifically for the R3 evaluation, as well as the data dashboards, which I'll talk about in a second. Sorry, Maureen, I threw you off there. So when you're in the online system, there are back and forward buttons to review answers and make corrections. There is a specific point within the system that does not allow you to click back. That is very clear, clearly laid out within the system, and I'll demonstrate that shortly. But all of that to say that if you have any issues, reach out to your grant specialist, and we'll talk about kind of what happens if maybe you need to make changes or anything like that. So going back to how we plan to feed the data back to you, research staff will develop data dashboards that are based on the PPR data that you submit. So this will allow each of the grantees you will be able to view and track and compare your data. So you will be able to do some internal comparison, kind of looking at your data over time, but you will also be able to do some broader aggregate average comparisons across things like regions or program types. So it will kind of allow you to look at where you're at compared to programs that are similar to yours. Research staff will provide a specific webinar on these dashboards at a later date. So just kind of be on the lookout for that down the line.
Lauren, let's stop here and see if there are any questions in the chat. Megan, have you seen any questions yet?
Nope, I don't see the questions.
Okie doke. Let's continue, Lauren.
Awesome. So moving into submitting the PPR. So after you finish your PPR and you hit submit, you will see a page basically that will allow you to save a PDF of that submitted PPR response. So we ask that you download that PDF, but you will also receive an email with a link to that PDF. So once you hit submit in the system, I have set up something called a trigger. So basically the system will immediately, however long it takes for the internet to do that, send you an email with just a summary of all the responses you submitted. And we ask that you provide your grant specialist a copy of that submitted PPR by the due date. So, you can say that for internal purposes, and you are also asked to please share it with your grant specialist. So once you submit the PPR into the system, you cannot make any changes. So once you're on that landing page that shows you a summary of all your responses, you cannot make changes at that point. However, there is an option to make changes. You kind of have two options. The harder way first is you could literally just go back and say, oh, dang it, I made a mistake. I'm just going to resubmit a whole new response. However, that requires you to re-enter all of the data you've already entered. And we know that could be time that could take some time and no one really wants to do that. So I would recommend the second option, which is just reaching out to your grant specialist and letting them know that maybe you made an error when submitting your Q1 data, and you're just asking for an update link is what I'd call it. And basically your grant specialist will just let me know, and I can provide you with what's called an update link. And basically that just saves the data you submitted previously, and you can just click through and make changes to just the data you need to make changes to. So instead of having to re-enter everything, you're just updating a few certain things that maybe you were in error or something like that.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing then, Lauren, so you can go ahead and share the PPR.
Awesome. Okay, so as I said, now I am going to demonstrate how the PPR system works. So as I mentioned, you will receive a link, and when you click your link, this is going to be your landing page. So there's some instructions for completing the system, and there's also a link to the folder that I described. So basically, this is just going to be it's a OneDrive folder, so it allows me to make changes to documents, and they're updated in real time on your end, which is great. You know, if a new FAQ comes up that I want everybody to know, I will make sure that it gets added to this document. If we want to make any changes to anything, that can happen in real time. So you can view everything in here. There's also links to the templates that I mentioned. So there's an Excel version and a Word version. I know sometimes it's easier to track in Excel and then submit into the online system, because one thing about the online system I'll demonstrate is that once you start, it's best to just enter it all in one sitting. So it doesn't really, I say this because I don't want people wasting their time. It does technically, if you're using a regular browser, it will save your progress. However, I don't want people to rely on that, because I don't want people to get, halfway through the system and then they close out and they're like, oh, I'll just come back later, and then it didn't save. I don't want to put that on people. So I would just recommend that you have all of your data ready before you sit down and start to enter. One thing I really wanted to highlight here is within this Excel template, it's going to look a little bit crazy, because it's going to have every single data reporting point that is listed in that. If you recall, when you were applying for your grant, there was a giant list of measures based on your program type that you could select from. So this has every single one of these, and I'll scroll down to kind of show you what I mean. So there's a lot of measures in here. What I would recommend is taking your grant contract, looking at the exhibit within your grant contract that lists out exactly what measures you said that you would report in your PPR, and only keeping those in there, because otherwise it's going to be really overwhelming to track this each quarter. So all of that to say, this form does need to be edited based on your specific grant contract. So I would recommend sitting down and doing that. But once you do, you can very easily enter your data here and then later go and enter it in the system. We know some people have, maybe one person knows this data point, another person knows this data point. So this allows for the collaboration to kind of fill this out before you get into the system, because only one person can submit the data within the system. It also allows for things like maybe you need someone to sign off on the data before it gets submitted to ICJIA. This allows for that as well. So hopefully, everyone finds these useful. One other thing to highlight, I did include the performance metrics template that was a part of the NOFO application. So this also contains that giant list of measures that I'm referring to. If you're like, what the heck is she even talking about? Maybe you weren't the one that submitted it. This is what I'm referring to. So you can kind of see this is what your options were, and this is what your program ended up choosing. So very long introduction into the system, but just wanted to make sure we're all kind of on the same page there. So the system will ask you to confirm that you've read the instructions and that everyone is on the same page. And this is the section where I referenced where it is providing you with the grant information, so you can clarify that this is your program reporting link. So this is all random test data, so it's all kind of made up, but It'll have your grant ID, your organization name, your program type, your funding region, and whether or not you are a collaborative. If any of these data points are incorrect, please reach out to your grant specialist so we can get it updated. The system bases your PPR based on a lot of this information. So I want to make sure that you are seeing the correct PPR. And so please reach out to your grant specialist so we can get that updated ASAP. So assuming everything is correct, you're going to move into entering your information. As I said, the system will send out a trigger email that will provide you a summary of your response. And it does that based on this specific information. So whoever is the person that is filling this out and wants to receive a copy of the submission, that is the contact information here. And then you're going to select the quarter that you are reporting for. So one thing that I really want to highlight here is the difference between a 0 and an NA. So a 0 means that that is information that your program collects, but it's just 0, right? So maybe you had no staff or you serve no clients. We're collecting that information. We just have done none of it at this point, which early in the grant period is pretty common. NA refers to information that you specifically do not collect or is just not applicable to your program. So you have no data to report here because it's not applicable. That again is explained in the FAQs and things like that, but I really want to highlight that here because there is a major difference and the system will allow you to type NA. So please do not enter 0 if you really mean that it's not applicable to your program. There are checks within the system that really only allow you to enter certain information. So, you know, I couldn't type blue here and submit it. It will not allow me to do that moving forward. So to avoid any issues, just want to provide that clarity. And then just for the sake of moving through the system, I'm just going to be entering zeros to move, you know, decently quick and not take up everyone's time here. But the first page you're going to enter data on is related to staffing. So we're kind of interested in knowing like how many staff you had at the start, how many staff maybe left, how many staff you were able to hire. So really allowing us to see the change in staffing throughout the grant. So if you are a collaborative, there is a possibility that, you know, you will be funding subrecipients as a part of the R3 grant. We ask you to provide information related to that. So for the sake of this testing, my organization is set to a collaborative to show you that there are specific questions related to collaboratives that single organizations will not be seeing. So if you're a single organization, you will not see some of these questions, but just for demonstration purposes, I wanted to include them. So for something like this, if you have a subrecipient, we're asking that you enter their name and address, just so we get a better understanding of what the organizations are. And then we're asking information regarding your plan to monitor those subrecipients. So if you're moving through the system and maybe some of this is not applicable, you will get this kind of, and so you leave certain things blank. You will get this thing basically saying, hey, you only answered one question here. Is that good or what? Or do you just forget? So because of this, I only have one made up subrecipient. I only need to enter one. So I'm going to continue without answering. So again, this is all related to subrecipients and things like data reporting and site visits and all of that. If you have questions about things related to that, I'm sure that there's already been a training on it, and I'm sure that Maureen could direct you to a useful PowerPoint presentation or recording associated with those things. So as you can see, there's a little progress bar, and here's my next and my back buttons demonstrating that maybe I realized, oh, dang it, I made a mistake on the last page. I'm going to click through. We're going to go back and update that. For the purposes of the demonstration, I'm going to say no here, but you know, if any of the subrecipients are identified as requiring a corrective action plan, then you will be asked to provide some details around that. If you have scheduled subrecipient site visits, that's a tongue twister, then you'll be asked to provide details around that as well. Again, for time purposes, I'm just going to say no here, but you'll be asked to provide, what dates are you expecting to do site visits. So now we're going to get into some of the client-served information. So first, we're going to ask, across for your program, what is the total number of clients that you served? And this can include duplicate clients. So this can include, this is obviously, the beginning of your grant, so no one's technically a duplicated client, but say it's Q2 and you already reported them in Q1, feel free to include them here again. So I'm just going to say 5. The second question is asking for the total number of unique new clients. So this is brand new clients that you have not served at all within the grant. And so for this example purpose, it is Q1. They're all brand new to me because it is the beginning of my grant. Next, it's going to be asking you about some race and ethnicity questions. Again, please enter NA if you don't collect this information, or 0 if you do. There is an option for unknown for certain, race and ethnicities. Maybe you don't know, or maybe that's something you don't collect. Maybe I could just put 5 here because I don't collect that information. If there's something other that maybe we're missing from our system, please feel free to include that here and enter it. I'm constantly checking things like this. We're looking at the data and what's submitted. And if we need to adapt our system to reflect things, then we're more than happy to do so. Same going into gender identity. Then we're going into ages. I'm just going to type 0 for every single one. So based on the grant application you submitted, you should have indicated what kind of R3 priorities, what kind of services you're providing. So, civil legal aid, youth development, economic development, violence prevention, reentry, that might be missing one. So the system is based on that, and then it just asks you to indicate, of the ones you applied under, what kind of services did you provide this quarter? Because there's a possibility that maybe you only provided one type of service, then you only have to select one. Otherwise, you can select both. Then it's going to ask about the kinds of engagement that you did in the community. So, did you do phone calls? Did you do community events? Did you do advertising in the community, whether that be physical or social media? I'm just going to pick the first 3. And then it's going to ask you, based on kind of, what is the most frequent kind of community engagement or outreach activities that you engage in, and then just drag and drop to rank them. So, maybe my imaginary program does community events and in-person one-on-one stuff the most, followed by phone calls third. So I'm just dragging and dropping them and ranking the frequency. Next, just for information gathering purposes, we're interested in knowing whether or not your program collects client data at the aggregate level, individual level, or both. If any of this is like, hey, I don't really understand what that means, I would definitely recommend you reference back to the data dictionary that I mentioned. That should explain in detail what we mean by all of these things. So if there's any confusion, I would highly recommend looking there first. And if you still don't have your question answered, please reach out to your grant specialist and we'll make sure that that clarification is provided to you. So maybe my program collects individual level data about my clients. And we're also interested in knowing, does your program collect identifiable information about your clients, or does it not collect identifiable information? And maybe I don't collect identifiable. Okay, so now we're going into the program, the service specific questions. my example program is a violence prevention youth development program. So this is specifically asking me about violence prevention services. And this is based on that really long list, which measures your program picked under each priority area. And so for my example program, I picked these two, and it just asks me to provide data related to that. So because these are things that you submitted as part of your application saying that you would report on it, and it's something that is within your grant contract, we kind of expect that you should be collecting data on this already because these are the things that you specifically picked. So there is not an option to enter NA here. So you really should be entering any kind of numerical value based on whichever measure you chose. So next, youth development, because again, my example program is a violence prevention youth development program. So just typing in 0 here.
Lauren, you have a couple questions.
Yeah, and this is a perfect place to pause. So let's do so and I'll answer them.
Perfect. One question is there just no Hispanic on the list? Is just Hispanic not a thing?
So simply just Hispanic, no other. I think it's broken into like white Hispanic, Black Hispanic. I don't think it's just Hispanic is an option. However, if that's only how you collect it, feel free to enter it as such in the other option where you would just write just Hispanic and then enter the numbers there.
Next question, if you didn't file a collab application but will have a sub-awardee, is the sub-awardee considered a subrecipient?
Yes.
Okay, I was going to say that's a good question. And
The answer is yes.
Okay. Next question is that section duplicated or unduplicated individuals?
So just before I answered that question, just going back to that, I guess this is a good question then, Maureen. If that is the case, then should it be updated that they're reporting that information
in the
system?
To clarify, the section with perpetrated violence.
Just going back to like the collab stuff, just to make sure we're
go back to the subawardee.
Yeah, sorry. If they should be reporting, on subawardee stuff, but they didn't apply as a collab, it will not be marked in here. I don't believe that they would see those questions. So if anything needs to be updated as such, please make sure your grant specialist is aware so we can update the back end of the data.
Perhaps what we'll do is we'll try to flag that for you, Lauren, so you can make sure that it's set up correctly for each grantee, because we are finding that a number of the grants that we're seeing so far do have subawards, but the grantee didn't consider those entities to be subawardees. They didn't identify it as a collaborative. So we'll try to flag some of those for you so they get set up correctly, because we don't want you to have to redo it.
Awesome. That's very helpful to know. Thanks. So yeah, anyone, if that applies to you and you realize, oh wait, I think I should be seeing the collaborative questions, please let your grant specialist know. Going back into, it was about whether or not the clients were duplicated or unduplicated in the perpetrated violence. Is that right?
Yes.
So I think that is explained in the data dictionary, and that's exactly the purpose of the data dictionary. I'm going to make a note just to make sure that it is, but I would recommend once you have your variables, or I'm calling them variables, but once you know your reporting points, like I'm going to be reporting that perpetrated violence, right? Just double check with the data dictionary and it'll say specifically, hey, this is what we mean by this. It should be a whole number. It should be duplicated or unduplicated clients. It clearly lays that out.
And then the last question is, is it adequate to report data on number of clients who perpetrated violence based on their self-report?
Yes, that's adequate.
And that's all the questions.
Awesome, thank you. So, like I mentioned, there is a point in the system that is not going to really allow you to go back. This is going to be that major point. And so we just, flag it right here, like, please make sure that you're good up until now. And if you aren't afterwards, please let your grant specialist know. We'll get you an update link. So again, this is going to be based on your grant contract. So if you recall, there was an optional kind of table to fill out that has objectives and measures related to your specific program. So that larger list of measures to select was kind of trying to find some common ground across every program, right? Like, we know youth development programs might be doing X, Y, and Z. And so we're kind of hoping that the majority of programs might be able to report one of 10 measures, just so we can kind of look at some commonalities across the programs. However, we recognize that R3 funds a range of programs, and that's one of the awesome things about R3, right? And so we want to allow the programs and you guys to develop your own objectives and measures and report on your progress to them, because we know each program has a range of goals specifically. So this section is related to that. So here it will list your objective and your measure. Again, this is a made up program. And so it will ask you to provide data related to that objective and measure. So for example, my measure is, I want 16 participants to participate in at least one volunteer project. And so since it's a count, I'm gonna enter my number here in this count section, and I'm just gonna enter 0 because, maybe it's the beginning of my program and we haven't had any volunteer opportunities at this point in time. And so here I'm going to indicate my progress towards my objective. So I'm gonna say that, we haven't started that yet because we haven't, had any volunteer opportunities yet. And then I'm gonna hit next. And again, it's gonna make sure that, hey, did you wanna leave this blank? And I'm going to continue. Then it's going to go into my next one. So as you can see, these are different each time. The system knows like what data to pull in specifically. And my measure here is 100 youth will attend healthy cooking classes. Maybe we were able to have a cooking class and we had 10 youth enter, 10 youth attend. So I'm going to enter 10. And I'm going to indicate that we're in progress towards that goal of 100. Next, we're going to go into our outcome objectives. And then same idea, right? So maybe our goal here is 75% of youth are exhibiting increased self-esteem, but because, our program just started, maybe we haven't done any post-tests related to that yet. So we're going to say 0%, and I'm going to enter it in the percent box. And I'm going to say it is not started yet. My last example, 100% of school partners will have a written plan developed each month, and maybe, we have 10%, so it's in progress.
Hey, Lauren, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
On those measures then, they shouldn't be filling in both the number and the percentage, right? So if
Correct.
the measure that's identified as being something you're going to report, you just report the percentage. If it's a number that's set as the measure, you just report a number. You shouldn't be seeing both of them. Will they get an error message if they do both?
They will not get an error message. However, theoretically at the back end, when we're cleaning data down the line, we'll recognize that, hey, something's off here. But that is the kind of purpose there, to differentiate that one is a percent, one is, just a count kind of thing.
Thank you.
Of course. So now, as you can see up from the progress bar, we are nearing the end of our system reporting, and we're going to ask for successes and barriers. Like Maureen indicated, this is really your opportunity to provide some great narrative context here around how things went this quarter and all that great stuff. And then I think this is lastly, we just ask you provide some feedback on the tool. So let us know how easy or difficult, like if you had any issues, please let us know. Specifically, if you have any, like maybe you're really dissatisfied, you had some difficulties with the tool, please mark it and please, provide some feedback here, because I do get emails from the system. If you flag that you had an error and then you provide me with some context here, I get an email about that, and then I'm able to make changes to the system based on that. So please, constructive criticism, we'd love to hear it. Okay, so as we said, this is how you're going to complete your reporting tool. You're going to hit next, and you're going to submit it. And this is what I referenced with that landing page of the PDF. If I scroll, I can see everything I submitted, and then I can download a PDF of this. So I would save this for my records, and then I would also make sure that it gets forwarded on to my grant specialist. So that is the PPR system. I'm going to stop sharing, and then if there are any additional questions, I can answer those.
As of right now, there aren't any additional questions.
Awesome. Well, as I said, as you execute your contracts, you will be receiving emails from the system. I have not sent any out yet, but I do anticipate in the coming months they will, like in the coming weeks, they will get sent out. If you have any questions throughout, again, please reach out to your grant specialist.
Thanks, Lauren. So now it's back to me, and we're going to finish up by talking about our review of the PPRs that you do submit. So, as I say through this training series, that we really see ourselves as partnering with our grantees, and the same way you're partnering with your subrecipients to implement the funded programs. So the PPR is really helpful for us to understand what your programs are accomplishing, and also to identify how we can, how this partnership with you, how we can support the program implementation. So when we're looking at the PPR, when we're receiving that PDF of the Qualtrics survey that you've submitted, we're going to look at a couple of things. We're going to see if there's any information that we expected you to be reporting on that is not being reported. We want to make sure that the answers make sense for the program. We want to kind of take a measure of whether the grant is on track to meet those performance benchmarks that we set in the agreement. We want to look at those narrative answers to see if there's any substantial barriers to implementation, and kind of determine if there's some technical assistance that we can provide. Do we need to give you a call and talk about these barriers, or why you're so far behind in reaching a benchmark, and really kind of have a conversation. And again, I want to emphasize this is a partnership, so we want to discuss this and come to a solution for you together. So it's not that we're not going to be the grant police. We are in it with you, and we want to help get to a solution for you. But we want to, have that discussion with you and see if there's any technical assistance that we can provide, or what's going on with the program.
Maureen, a couple questions have come through.
Okay, great.
First question, so the PPR tool on the drive is its own document that we transfer to the Qualtrics system?
So the files that are on the drive are to help you more easily collect the information throughout each quarter, right? So the Word document is a list of all of the measures that were in the NOFO that you were selecting from. The Excel file is, is the same information, but it's easier to add those things up in Excel than it is in Word, and so that's why we gave it kind of like a worksheet for you to be keeping throughout the life of throughout that quarter rather, so that you will be ready. You'll have that aggregated information when you sit down to fill in the survey, so which is the actual PPR. So the PPR is not in that OneDrive file folder. The PPR is on the link that you'll receive once you have an executed agreement.
The next is a clarifying question. Is there a PPR survey you just demonstrated and a PPR spreadsheet?
So the spreadsheet is the tool to help you collect the information that you will be entering into the survey. Because as Lauren said, we want to it does take a little time to enter the information into the PPR, which is that survey tool. And so in order to make that a simpler process, so you can just complete it all in one sitting and not lose any data that you've entered, we give you this tool to make sure that you have all of the information that you need when you sit down to open that link, get to the survey, which is the PPR tool, and complete the information.
That's
Any
it.
other questions, Meg?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. So when we receive this PDF from you and we review it, your grant specialist may give you a call for clarification or revision, or if there is something that they see there that they want to discuss with you. Don't be afraid when you get that call. As I said, this is just to make sure that the data that we're collecting is meaningful, and that, you know, if there are any issues, that we can address them sooner rather than later and see what we can do to help. If there are errors or missing data in your responses, and we have that phone call with you and, you know, kind of clarify that you were supposed to be completing that information, then we'll probably reach out to Lauren then and ask for that update link, which will give you the ability to go back into that quarterly report and to complete information that's missing or correct information that may have been misentered. So you're not going to receive the PPR link until you have an executed agreement. And that's because Lauren and her team are really creating these PPRs for you based on the goals, objectives, and performance measures in your signed agreement. So we really can't, you know, kind of, provide you that PPR until everything has been agreed on, until you have a signed agreement. So you won't be receiving it until you have a signed agreement, but you will get the link for once you have that agreement. It'll take a little time for the team to, you know, to craft your specific PPR. And if you lose that link for some reason, the person that was completing the PPR leaves and they forget to tell you where that link is, you can always just reach out to your grant specialist and they can provide the link to you again. So that's all the information that we have for you on the PPRs. But our last session in this initial training series is going to be on PPR best practices. So if you have more questions that occur to you after this, or when you review the recording, or look back at the PowerPoint after you get my email this afternoon, feel free to bring all those questions to our session next Wednesday at 11 o'clock, when we'll have the RNA team on and they'll be able to answer those questions for you. Megan, are there a couple of questions that came up?
2 questions came through.
Okay.
First one is, how long might it take to receive the PPR once the grant is executed?
I think the team turns it around really pretty quickly. I would hesitate to say, you know, a certain number of days, but you're going to be submitting your PPRs on a quarterly basis. So, you know, the earliest date that a grant can start for this cohort is November 1st. And we always report PPRs 15 days after the end of the quarter that's being reported. So, and we use the calendar quarter. So the first PPR will be for November and December. and that won't be due to us until January 15th. So you can start to, organize yourself to collect the information based on the goals, objectives, and performance measures that are in your agreement. But we'll give you that handy tool as soon as possible so that you can have both that Word document, you can have that Excel sheet, and your PPR you really won't really need that PPR until January, when you're going to be sitting down to complete that survey tool. You'll be collecting the information throughout the whole quarter, but you won't actually need that link until January. We'll get it to you as soon as we can, as soon as possible, after you have the signed agreement, though.
Next question is, to confirm, the official PPR is the survey.
That's correct.
Spreadsheet and the data dictionary support it.
That's correct.
Along with other backup documentation that we use to track measures that may be requested at any time during the grant cycle and most likely during our site visit.
That's correct.
Perfect. And that's the last question.
Okay. Then this is my last slide. I'm going to send you the link to our survey of how we're doing on our training. That'll be in this afternoon's follow-up email. I appreciate all your time. I know this is a lot of information and we kind of went through the PPR fairly quickly, but I think that once you have a chance to actually see it, I would encourage you to watch Lauren's demonstration again and maybe go a little bit, freeze those frames a little bit so you can, really absorb what she was demonstrating there. So I know that it's a lot, but I think that you have, Lauren and her team are enormously helpful. And I think that when you get that OneDrive folder and you see all of the kind of that backup work that she has done to create the dictionary and to give you these tools, so that the completion of the PPR is relatively simple for you. I think they've done a lot of that foundational work for you, so it should be actually achievable. But always reach out to your grant specialist if you have any questions or if something's not working for you, and we'll work with Lauren and her team to make sure that it does. So thank you for all your time today, and we look forward to seeing you on Wednesday for our last session. Thanks very much.